Well, good morning, everyone. Again, a wonderful pleasure to be with you today. Over the last few weeks, as I've done these leaders calls, I've focused primarily on different practical areas of building the business. We've looked at building the business online, some ways to do that, for example, with live streaming, with Facebook events. It's been wonderful to see people responding so positively and experimenting and learning with this. And there's been some fantastic videos that have been shared by so many of you over these last few weeks. Really tremendous. We've talked about personal branding. We've also talked about what it means to be a core consultant. And I'm thrilled that we've been able to introduce this new core consultant kind of program where we can all be connected and plug in together. We've had a wonderful response to our weekly newsletter. If you haven't signed up yet, please be sure to do so. Again, you can find the link there on the Magnetic Leaders website. But a great way to stay connected, and we're already seeing some wonderful, getting some wonderful feedback with that, which is great. I wanted to take a slightly different approach today and talk a little bit along the vein of what we all know and love here in NECAN, and that is within the spirit of humans being more. And oops, I think someone jumped on here as NECAN. So I want to talk really in the spirit of humans being more, achieving our best potential, applying these principles, and of course, learning and growing our mind and our hearts. I think that's something that is dear to all of us. It's why we love doing what we're doing and being a part of NECAN. So with that in mind, before we talk about this compounding effect of daily disciplines, which is something so critical for each of us, I want to first identify one of the challenges. Oh, it's gone off again. What's going on here? Bear with me 1 minute. I'm having a technical malfunction here. Okay, so first of all, here is one of the challenges that we all face. For many of us, we can have bursts of good behavior. We can have bursts of consistent activity, but the challenge, of course, is maintaining it. This is one of the, I think, the barriers for many people in being able to achieve consistent standards of excellence. So I want to put this, first of all, into the context of science. The second law of thermodynamics is a law called entropy. This idea of entropy is really typically dealing with energy, but what I have observed as a novice in this area, of course, is that entropy really applies not just in thermodynamics and energy or in science, but in every aspect of life. It usually refers to the idea that everything in the universe eventually moves from a state of order to a state of disorder. For example, if I show you this picture here, as you look at these dots on the left and on the right, you've got one box here with random dots. You have another box with ordered dots. According to science, which would you suggest comes first? Now, I guess I could ask you that and get you to respond, but the answer is also in the diagram. What you'll see is the time of the arrow's time, the time of arrow, excuse me, get my words out, time's arrow goes from the state of order and moves in one direction, as time always does, to a state of disorder. So according to science, order comes first and things move from a state of order to a state of disorder. I love this diagram below. If you toss bricks off a truck, which kind of pile would you expect to produce? What this tells us, of course, is that disorder is far more probable than order. And I think the same applies in business, the same applies in our relationships, the same certainly applies in our minds, that things, I'm not suggesting that that disorder is the name of the state of business and relationships and our minds. My point is this, that our minds, our relationships, our businesses, our lives move from a state of order to a state of disorder unless we reverse the effects of entropy. How do we do that? Well, it's really quite straightforward. We apply energy to the system. That is, again, using the scientific explanation, to reverse or minimize the effects of entropy, you apply energy to the system. Now, according to our minds, of course, in order to improve our minds and get them where we want them to be, I love this quote by Benjamin Franklin: "Little strokes fell great oaks." The benefit of this principle, of course, is that we can make great change in our minds, in our relationships, in our hearts, in our businesses, by repeating little things on a consistent basis over time. Now, we've talked about this, I think, a number of times, and I'm sure many of us have read books on the subject, especially when it talks about positive thinking, having the right attitude, and doing the critical activities. In fact, we look at the core consultant behaviors that we talked about when we introduced the program. And what does that tell us that we should do? Well, critical behaviors are that we should talk to at least one person every day, and that we should show a presentation at least twice a week. Now, the challenge for many of us is not that we don't know that, it's that we don't feel like doing it. And I'm not saying that we always feel that way. Often we feel like doing it in great abundance. But the challenge is, of course, learning to do it consistently. I believe one of the most important things that we can learn to practice on a daily basis is not just the right activities, but the right thinking. It's been said that what we do is the fruit of what we think, feel, and believe. So to that point, if we want to change our actions, for many of us, it starts with needing to change our thoughts, our feelings, and our beliefs. I want to use another example here, and this story comes from ancient Greek mythology. I love this story, and I'm not going to wax lyrical and tell you the whole story because we don't need to jump into it in any great length here today. But the story comes from is a story about an ancient Greek king called Sisyphus, and he was punished as a result of deceiving some of the other gods and escaping death, to be forced to an eternal punishment. What was his punishment? His punishment was to roll a big boulder to the top of the hill, which would take him almost the entire day to do. At the completion of his task, it would roll back down the hill and he'd have to start again. Now, this is obviously something that would be incredibly horrible to have to do for an eternity. We often find if we get told, if we're engaged in mindless or purposeless repetitive activity, that it is often referred to as a Sisyphean activity or task, meaning that it is completely without purpose and redundancy, and is redundant. So my point is this: as we work on doing things on a daily basis, we don't want to be like Sisyphus. We don't want to be rolling a boulder up a hill only to find at the beginning of each day that we're having to start again and do the same thing over, if it is not producing the right result. So critically, I believe, as we start this process of improving our minds, we need to look at and improving our results. The critical starting point, I believe, is with our mind, not just with our actions. I heard this great quote: "Tell me what you think about when you don't have to think, and I'll tell you what kind of person you are." That's interesting, isn't it? Where are your thoughts when you're not engaged in the business? When you're making your dinner, when you're showering in the morning, maybe when you're driving or going for a run? Where does your mind wander? Where does it go? There was an interesting study done a number of years ago with two groups of people. One group was a group of people that were fortunate enough to win the lottery. Another group was a group of people that had experienced life-changing spinal injuries. Now, both groups of people were interviewed and questioned 5 years after their significant event. And the purpose of the interview was to discover who was happier. Now, this might sound like potentially a stupid question, but then, of course, the fact that I'm asking it, suggests that maybe it's a trick one. The question was this: which one is happier? Which do you think would be happier? What would make you happier, breaking your back or winning the lottery? Again, it sounds like a silly question, doesn't it? But the reality was really fascinating in the outcome of this research. The truth was the emotional home that each person had developed before that life-changing event determined their state of happiness and well-being 5 years afterwards. Meaning, if I won the lottery, but I was a pessimist, or I was a grumpy old beggar that always saw things, with just a negative outlook. Even though I won the lottery, I'd still be a grumpy old beggar 5 years down the road. If I was an optimist and I broke my back, but I was an out there, go-getter, really engaged, positive person, then, of course, if I broke my back 5 years down the road, I would find that I would still be an outgoing, optimistic, forward-thinking person. That the emotional home that we create for ourselves, the place that we go to in our mind or in our heart, when things are tough or when things are good, really defines our state of mental or emotional well-being. Now, I share this because as we go through our business, as we go through our lives, as we build our relationships, as we just build ourselves, and especially as we're training, supporting, leading, mentoring others, it's really important that we evaluate the habits of our mind to ensure that we're getting the best out of our business and our lives as possible. So I want to ask you this. As you look at your daily activities that you're engaged in, we've talked, of course, about speaking to one person a day as a minimum, doing a couple of presentations a week. We've got this wonderful approach with the I Can program where there is that consistent repetition of positive affirmations, which is really important for us to keep mentally focused and sharp. Here is my question for you. What time do you give each day to building your mind and your emotional habits? Let me share with you a little poem. I really like this. It's not a rhyming poem, but it's good nonetheless. I am your constant companion. I am your greatest helper or your heaviest burden. I will push you onward or drag you down to failure. I am completely at your command. Half of the things you do, you might as well turn over to me and I will do them quickly and correctly. I am easily managed, but you must be firm with me. Show me exactly how you want something done, and after a few lessons, I will do it automatically. I am the servant of great people, and alas, of all failures as well. Those who are great, I have made great. Those who are failures, I have made failures. I am not a machine, though I work with the precision of a machine, plus the intelligence of a person. You may run me for profit, or you may run me for ruin. It makes no difference to me. Take me, train me, be firm with me, and I will place the world at your feet. Be easy with me, and I will destroy you. Who am I? A friend of mine asked this question to a group of people a number of years back, and he said he got a shout out from the back of the room saying, my wife. The answer to the question, of course, is not our spouse. The answer to the question, who am I, is habit. Our habits have the power to make or break us. And of course, as I said, they begin in our minds and in our hearts before they begin in our actions. So the starting point for me, as we look at developing our habits today, and as we look at being able to have that constant repetition of good things that we do on a daily basis, the critical thing that we do, I'm going to just skip back this slide here, is we need to make sure that we have purpose. I look at the emotion on Sisyphus's face here, and it looks pained, it looks strained, it looks wearied. His body looks muscular, but he doesn't look like he's enjoying himself. The critical thing for us as we begin a pattern of daily focus and attention is that we recognize the great purpose in what we are doing. If we see no purpose in the activity, if there is no vision for what we're trying to accomplish, then of course we will feel like our daily routines are very much like Sisyphean tasks. So the critical thing to start with is, what purpose am I working towards? We recognize, of course, that results take time to measure and that good habits take a while to form, and so that it's important for us not to feel too quickly that our daily routines may feel a little Sisyphean. We want to make sure, of course, that we are patient with the process. But I love this example that I've used many times over with this wonderful story about the paradox. The paradox that exists in order for us to get the right result between having that mental clarity of what our present reality is, but at the same time never having lost sight at the end of our story that it will be positive, that it will be victorious, and that it will be something that we're striving to achieve. We need to get the balance of both in our business, don't we? And in our mind, that wonderful harmony of brutal reality being accepted at the front end, whilst at the same time never losing sight in the end of our story. I believe that we can have that. I want to encourage each of us today to spend just a little bit of time in evaluating our thoughts, our beliefs, and our ideas, and look at how they translate into our daily activities. One way to be able to see what we're really thinking and what we really believe is to evaluate what our daily activity is. If I'm not recruiting on a regular basis, if I am not out there gathering new customers consistently, what does that tell me about my beliefs? Does it tell me that I don't believe in myself? Does it tell me that I don't believe in my business? Does it tell me that I don't believe in others? The absence of activity, nonetheless, tells us something. What does it tell us? I would encourage each of us to sit down and evaluate. What does my behavior tell me? What does my mindset tell me? What can I do differently? I'm confident that as we have a brief moment just once a week, if we take 30 minutes, if we take 30 minutes at the end of each week to evaluate and to observe our own performance, I'm confident that we'll be able to find opportunities to improve and to restructure our habits. I know that as we pay particular attention on a daily basis, that we can do better and better. I'm thankful that I've been able to learn, sometimes the hard way, of the power of persistence and the power of being able to just keep at it. I'm grateful that patience is developed over a lifetime, because the reality is that's what gives us the wisdom and the need to move forward. I want to conclude just by sharing a poem. This one does rhyme. I may have shared it with you in the past, but it's about never giving up. And I think it's relevant, especially in not so much in giving up in our business, but I'm talking about giving up in our thinking, never giving up in our habits, never giving up in doing what is right, because this is something that I think we need to be able to have the mental grit, the mental fortitude to just persist and keep going. So let me share this with you. Let me just pull it up here. One second. Let me just pull it up here. I'm going to just pause my screen for just 1 second, and then I'll pull it up here so you can see it yourself. I'm going to do a stop share. Okay. So I want to just share this poem now, and I really, really like it. But because, like I said, it just tells us really what we need to be able to do here. So quit, give up, is the name of the poem here. So when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile, but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Life is queer with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns, and many a failure turns about when he might have won had he stuck it out. Don't give up, though the pace seems slow. You may succeed with another blow. Often the goal is nearer than it seems to a faint and faltering man. Often the struggler has given up when he might have captured the victor's cup. And he learned too late when the night slipped down how close he was to the golden crown. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint of the clouds of doubt. And you never can tell how close you are. It may be near when it seems so far. So stick to the fight when you're hardest hit. It's when things seem worse that you mustn't quit. I really like that, ladies and gentlemen, because I've applied that not just to my business, but really to my thinking. The enemy of most of us is our own thoughts, isn't it? And I've found that time and time and time again, that one of the greatest challenges that we face in our business is ourselves. And so I want to encourage each of us to practice a little bit this week on developing some good effects, some good habits that we can apply to our minds as well as to our activities, that we encourage ourselves to persist, to keep going, to hang in there, to try another day, to work another week, to keep moving forward. But we've got to have confidence in the end of our story. That, to me, is the critical point. I love what can be achieved consistently over time by doing the right things on a daily basis, if only for a few minutes. So that's my invitation to each of you today. Let's make the most of the week. Let's put our best foot forward. And of course, let's put our best thinking in our hearts and in our minds and lead out with positive attitudes, positive perspective, with great hope, great confidence, and great conviction. And again, the great thing is, as we do this persistently over time, we can see that it will become a reality for us. Thank you all very much, everyone. Have a great week, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.